World Financial Group offers entrepreneurs from all backgrounds the opportunity to start their own business on a level playing field. Dr. Yana Woodhouse, receiving the WCM Wall Street Pioneer Award by the United Black Wall Street of America, Inc., is one of those entrepreneurs.
I see WFG and TFA as a place where African Americans with an entrepreneurial mindset can flourish. And the bonus, we help families and serve the communities across the country.
To learn more about us, go to worldfinancialgroup.com.
We are the sons and daughters of the soul. We are resilient and forever forward-thinking. We ask for nothing else than the opportunity to live and to create the lives that we were meant to live. We want nothing but an equal chance at options and possibilities. The same possibilities and options to live out our potential as our fellow man. We want to be heard, understood, and expressive in our reality. We are the future. We are the creative. We are here.
This is Kia Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.
Hey, what's happening?
Good afternoon. Tony Rogers here, your host for Urbanology, the Art of War. I hope all is well. November the 1st. Wow. The year is almost over. There are a couple of things that are important to be part of our show today. One is the election and how important that is going to be. And we're going to talk about that. I hope to have one of my close friends, Assemblywoman Inez Dickens, on as part of the show to give some very last minute information. Early voting has started, and as you know, November the 8th is that day. But between now and I believe Sunday, you can go to polls. Be aware, though, it may not be your exact voting place. There may be a difference, but we'll talk a little bit about that a little later on. The other thing is November the 6th is the New York Marathon, and on Sunday, November the 6th, we being the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce and Harlem Tourism Board and other organizations, we put together an event called the Harlem Mile. As runners, the 26.2, I believe, run throughout the boroughs. The last borough you get into will be Manhattan. And when you get off the bridge at 138th Street and Fifth Avenue, going down Fifth Avenue, going towards the park, that's the last leg, but it's also called the wall, because at that point, you've run through all of the boroughs and your body is beginning to tell you that it can't go any further, and you start to cramp up. So a few years ago, the New York Road Runners, and many of you may not know, Percy E. Sutton was borough president. He worked with the road runners to create this borough-wide run. The New York Road Runners have always been a part of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, and what they decided to do with us is to create what we call the Harlem Mile, that the roughest part of the marathon, really, especially for new runners. So we have entertainment stages on 138th Street and Fifth Avenue. There's gospel on 125th Street. It's rhythm and blues at 121st Street and Marcus Garvey Way. We have a dedication to Marvin Gaye's What's Going On 116th Street and Fifth Avenue. We have Caribbean and Latin. And then at 110th Street and Fifth Avenue, we have jazz. So as the runners run through this difficult part of the Harlem Mile, as we call it, they are able to get re-energized. Some even stop and dance and do things that would allow for them to gather that last bit of energy in order to finish the race. It's after 110th Street, they go up a hill a little bit, and then they go into the park at 90th Street, and then they go down to the finish line. So many people come out because this is a close-up and personal way to see the runners. It's always packed and crowded downtown. So as we start doing this over and over again, a lot of people realize that they can actually see the people that they're rooting for up close and personal. So that's how that's going to go. I know that a lot of people were able to take advantage of many of the things that took place during yesterday, Halloween. The City College of New York had this Scare Fest, which was scary. The students there in the theater department put on a wonderful show. City College has tunnels going through what we call the NAC building on 138th from Convent Avenue, and there were people all over trying, getting in to go through this Scarefest tunnel tour, which was great. I know on 125th Street, the Harlemwood event, where again they had all kinds of safe activities for young people, and Jackie Rowe Adams at 128th Street and between St. Nicholas and 8th at the Harlem Mothers Save location had all kinds of different types of activities there too. So young people had a wonderful way to actually have a safe Halloween with their families, which was a great thing. And all of this week, there are a lot of different things taking place in Harlem, because since we are doing the Harlem Mall with the road runners, we are doing special activities within the community to allow for people to understand, one, that it's a wonderful business opportunity for Uptown also. Thousands of people out there, there are thousands of people that are running, and they come not by themselves. They come with family, they come with friends, they come with trainers and coaches and other runners. So this is one of the major tour economic development, hospitality industry, tour industry that takes place in New York. And what we're doing as far as allowing for people to understand the things that are going on in Harlem, we we have a number of different events. If you go to the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce.com or call 212-862-7200, you can get information as relates to the different programs for the Harlem Mile activities for the New York Marathon taking place in Harlem. I know that I do expect my Assemblywoman to come on, but one of the reasons I wanted her to come on is to talk about some of the things that we should be aware of. The first and foremost is the fact that actually early voting has started. It started, I believe, either the 30th or the 31st, and it will continue until this Sunday. And you have a number of different options as it relates to time. You could reach out to the voter elections number, and many of you who, especially in the New York area, probably have received stuff in the mail as relates to that. If you are, and I know this is a national and international show, but if you are in New York State, there is on the back of the ballot an entity for clean air asking for money to be set aside for clean air and clean water, and to make sure also that there is money set aside for issues of rebuilding our shores and protecting ourselves so that we are prepared for the next Sandy, which will coming based on global warming. We know that this is just the beginning. And you don't have to be on the outskirts of the city by the shore in order to be affected by Sandy. Harlem had some floods. There are a lot of people's cars, in certain parts of the area on the far east, on the east side of Harlem, and also on the west side, because again, Harlem is surrounded by water as well as Manhattan, which is why when there are issues, Manhattan, the subways can get flooded. All of those things have to be looked at now based on the fact that there is an issue of global warming. And in that whole climate change, things are happening that have never really happened to the magnitude that they're happening at this particular point. So it's important, as I said before, to go out and vote, because I know sometimes it's depressing to look at the news, but no matter where you go, you can't get away from the fact that there is a movement to take away the vote. And if many people say that voting is not important, well, if voting wasn't important, you wouldn't see a major campaign to keep you from voting, because we've seen how the voting can and should be able to allow for people to have some sort of a voice as to who is representing them. Now, there has been many attempts, as you might know, if you're in America, because everybody outside of America knows. So sometimes as I travel, I'm amazed at how people outside of this country have better knowledge of what's happening here than those who live in this country. Nevertheless, the concept of democracy is being challenged. And I can't explain to you what that means to people a little older in this journey that we've been through in America, a little older, who can remember what it took in order to get the right to vote. People died for that to happen. There were all kind of atrocities taking place because there was a fear that our democratic process would allow for people who were not being represented correctly to be able to change that and bring into office those who at least gave them some sort of sense of security as it relates to representing their needs. What you see now is a great deal of fear going on about the crime and about a number of other things. And yes, there is a lot to be concerned about. However, there are many things that we don't hear about. And I was talking to Mike Gardner and some people from the MTA, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in the subways. But but when you talk about the millions and millions of people who ride the subway every day, these things are focused on because bad news is good news as it relates to the media is concerned. But it creates a certain kind of fear that I wouldn't say is unfounded, but it's put into another type of dimension other than what it is, because too many people are able to ride safely on the subway and not go into all of that stuff. So, but that, again, it all is about politics. A lot of people don't realize that politics is a very important step in our environmental and social content. From the day that you're born to the day that you die, there's some political structure that has to be dealt with, whether it's a birth certificate or a death certificate or whatever. So when you say you're not interested in politics, that is a certain area of being naive that one has to look at. Obviously, there are things that none of us or many of us do not appreciate, and there are a lot of things that need to be dealt with. But when things become so blatantly unjust, you have to wonder whether or not there is an opportunity to correct that through the electoral process. I believe I have my leader and the person who I was dancing to try to keep everybody as alert as possible until we can bring on the person who really you need to hear from, and that's Assemblywoman Inez Dickens. And if Inez is on, please have her come on so that I can speak with her. My leader.
Hi, how are you? How are you
I'm
doing, Tony? It's so good. And I want to thank Urbanology and Soul Studio for allowing me this opportunity to discuss what's so important to Black and Brown people.
Well, I was just keeping everything warm for you. You know how Sandman used to get out there and dance before the show. So I can tap off and leave it to you, my leader, to allow for people to understand not only the importance of it, but how they can do it, the early voting and all of the things that I know that you can do it. I must admit, you are beautiful as ever.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoy hearing that. Thank you so much.
But let the listeners know and the viewers know how important this election is.
Tony, this election this year is critical. And we as Black and brown people cannot afford to sit back and say, I'm not going to vote this year. I'm going to sit it out. We cannot afford to say the weather is bad, so I don't feel like going. We cannot afford to say, oh, I feel that my vote does not count, because every single vote counts. There are people that have won by one vote. So that means every single individual vote is important and critical. It's important to us that we vote this year more than ever, because if we do not, then the wrong person that does not represent our needs, that believes that teachers should have guns in the classroom with our kids, that believes that you should have ghost guns where anybody can build a rifle or any type of gun at home by purchasing the parts over the internet and have them delivered through the mail. A person that does not believe in a woman's right for her own, deciding for her own body and her own mental state, what she wants to do with her body. A person that believes that it's all right that we should be in war. A person that says we should not have our arms extended, when in fact this country was built when not the arms of the Native Americans that were already here. They didn't extend their arms, although they did once you got here. But the Europeans came here and just took the country over. And yet today, we would be allowing someone to get in that says it's, let's close the borders, let's build a wall, let's decide that no one can come in, once now that the Europeans have come in 200 years ago. So this is somebody who would also, and I don't believe in calling my opponents names, but this is an opponent to someone that I strongly support, which is Kathy Hochul. But besides from that, the bottom line is that we've got to vote. And if downstate fails to vote in a huge number that overcomes the upstate vote, that it's the upstate vote that will decide for New York City, the 5 boroughs, who will get elected and what will be done for the next 4 years. So I can't stress the importance of New York City residents coming out, not just the residents, but you've got to be a citizen. Now, I do support that, but that New York City residents and citizens that are registered to vote can come out and vote. Now, we've advertised a lot, and I want to make this very clear because this is very important, Tony, is that we've been advertising, the Board of Elections has been advertising the importance. If you don't feel like coming out and vote, whether it's COVID related, or you don't feel like it, or you're going to be out of town, or you're going to be sick, or you've got to be taking care of someone who is totally dependent upon you, or you are a sole small business owner, to utilize absentee ballot applications, and the ballots would be sent to you. You would complete your ballot, sign the envelope that the ballot goes in, not the ballot itself, but the envelope that the ballot goes in, and then seal it, and that envelope goes in another mailing envelope. We've been advertising strongly the use of that. However, I want people to understand that during this election, and because of this election, the Republicans took that law to court and had it challenged, and the court upheld that the votes can be sent in. They can mail out the ballots, they can be mailed back to the Board of Elections, but they cannot be opened and counted until the court determines the process and whether it will even be allowed. So I'm telling people that I know we advertise that, but now that there's been a court order stopping the opening and counting of those ballots, that if in any way you are able to get to the poll site, and right now we're doing early voting. So rather than to wait until November the 8th, Tuesday, November the 8th, which is General Election Day, that we can use this up until, I think, Monday before, that you can go and vote with early voting at the poll itself. Now, if I just want to also let people know that if in fact that they were had already sent in for a ballot, which is something that my sister had done, sent in for her ballot, and that now because of this court upholding that they cannot count the ballots, and her fear and my fear that maybe they won't be opened at some point. They will be, but at what time will they be built? Because the problem with that, Tony, is, and I want the public to understand that the problem with that is if they're not counted timely, then the vote on the machine voting may signal that one candidate won. But when they eventually do count the absentee ballots, maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, it may change who got elected by the machine. And so that's why I'm suggesting to people that they really do try desperately to go to the polls if they can, if they have the ability, if they need transportation, if there's an issue with them getting to the polls, they should, I'm going to give you a number before we get off that they can call to ask for a pickup, and we will try to give a pickup. I'm going to ask everyone to get a pen and pencil. Get a pen and pencil in case, and then this is particularly in the 70th Assembly District, because obviously I can't take care of all of Manhattan, but in the 70th Assembly District, which principally runs from 144th Street to 110th Street, from the Hudson River on the west to approximately Madison Avenue on the east. And this is the number. I'm going to give it slowly. 646 206 2528. Again, 646 206 2528. And that's the number to the elected male state committee person for the 70th, Londell Davis, who will take the call, or you can leave a message with your phone number, with your name, with your address, and we will attempt to provide transportation to those that are physically challenged and have extreme difficulty in getting to the polls. Now, we're not going to take everyone, but if you're physically challenged and have extreme difficulty of getting to the polls, then we will do the best we can to pick you up, take you to the polls, and return you home.
One of the things, a question that I have, you had mentioned that some people, including your sister, did an early vote, and now maybe a little.
She emailed in for an absentee ballot.
Oh, okay.
And she got the absentee ballot received in the mail. But because of this court ruling that said that the ballots will not be immediately counted, which means I don't know when they will be counted. No one can predict when the court will determine they can be counted, nor do we know at not only the time frame, but if in fact they will be opened. So, I'm trying to advocate and tell people to please be cognizant, be aware that this is a court case. Now, of course, we're challenging that. We're asking for that to be overturned so that the absentee ballots are immediately counted. But we have not won that as of yet. So I'm asking people in view of the fact that we don't know what's going to happen with that court case, And obviously, at some point, because there's be a constitutional problem, that's constitutional law, the right to vote.
Right.
All
So
the United
far.
States. So there would be an issue and a court case brought up on constitutionality if, in fact, they never count the ballots. So I'm just thinking, but I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge. I'm just thinking at some point they will have to count those ballots. But at what point will that be?
I think that, and I want people not to be confused. If you did send off that ballot and now there's a concern, you probably should not go and vote, because then that might create an issue of double voting. Is that correct?
Well, the thing is, this is the thing. Supposedly, in a perfect world, and this is not a perfect world, supposedly, if you sent in for a paper ballot, for an absentee ballot to be mailed to you, that if you didn't use it and you go to the polls, the problem is they won't allow you to vote on the machine because they tagged your name and said that you got a paper ballot.
Right.
So what they would do was give you another paper ballot. So for those people that did not send for an absentee ballot, or have not as of yet sent for that absentee ballot, that they please utilize the going to the polls directly. Now, for those that did send for it, I want you to understand that that ballot is called an affidavit ballot, which is different from absentee. What the court held up on was absentee ballots. The affidavit ballot is a voter that actually went to the polling site to cast their ballot, and for whatever reason, in this case, because they sent for a paper ballot, they had to use what's known as an affidavit ballot. There is a difference.
So now, one of the things I had the opportunity to interview Senator Robert Jackson yesterday, and he made a good point, and I would like for you to talk a little bit about the ecology and the clean water bills that's on the other side of the ballot, that sometimes people don't turn that over to see.
Oh, they sure don't. There's four ballot amendments that you have to flip the ballot over. You have to flip them over and to vote on them. And it's important because a lot of times in our communities, we don't respond to those. And things happen that we don't want to support. Or things don't happen that we wanted to support. So it's important that we flip those over. Take your time. Don't let anybody rush you. Take your time. There's 4 proposals. The first one is the ballot proposal is about the Clean Water, Clean Air, Green Jobs, Environmental Bond Act. Now, that's important because we're talking about, what is happening to our world today, and how do we make it a clean world that we're able to sustain in and be a world for the future. The purpose of this particular bill would be to allow state bonds, in other words, state issued bonds that would be sold in order to fund environmental projects. Now, there's literally, I guess, hundreds of different environmental projects, but there will be funding some of them that are the most critical. And these projects will be intended to help to mitigate, for instance, flood damage, as in the floods that we had during Sandy and
recently.
More recently, it would help to mitigate and build. Like they're trying to do in Lower Manhattan right now. They're trying to build sustainability to prevent such flooding of, for instance, our subway stations where you couldn't even go in. And if you did go in, the water was up to your waist and you were scared to death about the electricity. It will also help to provide funding to protect natural resources, such as our water, to provide clean water and conserve lands. So this is to improve the quality of our water and our infrastructure for preventing floods and for clean air. So
And that should be anybody, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, everybody
exactly.
has to breathe air.
That's the first, because that's a no-brainer. That's number one. The second one is a statement of values to guide the government, and the purpose of that is to introduce text to the New York City, not state, but the New York City Charter. So this is one that affects New York City. This is to change our city charter so that it changes the preamble that says that these words will guide the principle for city government to promote justice and equity for all. Now that sounds great. I'm not quite so sure, due to the radical racism that we have in this entire country, including the city and state. I don't know if that's going to hold true, but it sounds good if in fact it's done. But if it passes, just to let people know that it will. The city charter does not have that, and this adds a preamble that will include this to acknowledge supposedly the historical injustices, and to embrace the city's diversity, and to recognize what the residents here in New York City that need to thrive. And it would serve to guide the city on governmental operations. So that's the part. The first part sounds great, no problem. The second part is where I'm a little fearful about. But however, that is the second ballot proposal. And I'm explaining the ballots rather than dictating to anyone what I think how they should vote on it. The ballot proposal number 3 is to establish a racial equity office, a plan, and a commission. And the purpose of that is to create an office of racial equity that requires the citywide, get a city racial equity plan every 2 years to create a commission on racial equity. Now, we've had other racial commissions and commissions to determine if there's equitability in us, in the Black and brown people getting the contracts on all the various agencies. And so this is just the creation. My problem with that one is that we keep funding all these different, like this one. The first one, the about the environment, is a no-brainer, absolutely. But this one, what I'm fearful about is that we already are short on funds. We're asking, and Senators Schumer and Gillibrand are arguing for additional funding from the federal government to come into the state and city, particularly because the city is spending extra money in that we're bringing and welcoming our doors to the immigrants that are coming in, that are not coming in from another country, but that are being shipped in, transported in from Texas and Florida.
And I was reading that most of the cities that these immigrants are being shipped to have black mayors or mayors of color.
Exactly. And so it's going to be, we already have not insufficient affordable housing. We already have crowded classrooms. We already have where we do not have homes or shelters or secure shelters or viable shelters for the homeless. So we've got a high homeless problem. We've got a lot of housing stock that's not affordable, and yet we now will have the asylum seekers coming into our communities, and they're going to be brought into the Black and brown communities. They're not going to be equitability distributed around the entire city within all 5 boroughs. Now, that's my argument. Not saying no, but saying that everybody must be willing to accept the asylum seekers, because to load them as they have already done with drug programs and with shelters in our communities, such as in Harlem. I'm speaking about Harlem, but I can speak about all of the Harlems across the state. It's our communities, the Black and brown communities, that have been inundated with all of these programs. And so that's going to be the same thing that happens with the asylum seekers. They're going to overload and saturate our communities. And they say, you know, the administration say, well, we own land in your community. Well, you own land because for years in all of the Harlems across the state, nobody invested in our communities. So our land was the cheapest that you could buy. So years ago, and the city in New York City, they took over ownership of over 70% of the properties back 50 years ago. So now that they're unloading some of that, the stock that they have left is what they want to use. But we've already accepted all the different drug programs, all the different supportive housing, all the different other agencies and issues that provide services that are barely needed, but they're barely needed throughout the entire city, not just in Black and brown communities. Yeah. So that's, you know, I feel that we're using additional money for just yet another office that's going to do the exact same thing the last office that we funded to do, and we got nothing out of it. So, because I believe that if a commission or an office or a task force is needed, I want it to be needed but operational and have the ability to have to provide actual services and be able to tell what they have done or not done for the funding they're getting. I don't believe in just funding to fund, because we need to fund education, we need to fund housing, we need to fund healthcare. I mean, I could just go on and on about our cultural institutions, and Black media, Black radio, and Black television has got no money in support of their existence. So that causes me alarm, because we keep funding all these different things repetitively, and then we say, well, we don't have the money. And then I'll go to the last proposal, because I know you've got a time frame, is to measure the true cost of living. The purpose of this is to require the city to measure the actual cost of living for city residents to meet essential needs. It's intended to focus on dignity rather than poverty. Now, I don't even know what that means, because you know, how much dignity, you can still have dignity and be poor. You know, so I don't know what this means. Poverty does not mean that you have no dignity. You know, it just means that you lack resources, but it doesn't mean you don't have dignity about what you're doing. So, I kind of object to that verbiage. You know, that it's going to focus on dignity, you know, rather than poverty. I don't know what the heck that means. So, you know, that scares the heck out of me. You know, about, because that's like saying Black and brown people, you poor, so you don't have no dignity. Yeah, right. So
you could be rich and not have dignity, right?
How about that? So so that's that one I'm not quite so sure what that means, and I'm not so sure about how they're going to measure the true cost of living, because I'm going to tell you, when I was in the city council, they kept saying that that unemployment. This was during the time when we had the massive down in the economy around 2009, and they were saying that unemployment, was staying stationary, or it was going down. And I said, well, wait a minute here. This I don't understand it. I asked the finance department that was giving this forum. I said, well, wait a minute now. That sounds good, but I don't understand how that is when I look at my community and we're so highly unemployed. What are you talking about? And so they said, well, it's going down. So then I said, well, as I look at these numbers, see, you got to understand the numbers. I said, so as I look at these numbers, you, to me, are raising the bar. I said, that's what I see. You're raising the bar so that as the economy dips further downward, you raise the bar so that it looks like unemployment is staying the same or getting less. And they admitted to me that I was correct, but that the other council members hadn't caught that.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I never forgot that, because in any level of government, they can come up with anything that is demanded of them, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's factual, that it's based on fact. Doesn't necessarily mean it's based on fact.
Illusions of reality.
Aware of those things. And so when we talk about measuring the true cost of living, the proposal summary kind of scares me a little bit. I'm not quite so sure all right, so they measured, what is that going to do? Are they going to provide additional jobs? Because more and more small businesses are closing up daily, particularly after the pandemic, but before the pandemic. Small homeowners are losing their homes that have 10 families or less. They're losing them. And what's happening is they're being bought up and taken over and restructured and rebuilt, because we couldn't get the money to do what's necessary to rehab them fully. And then we aren't able to move back in them. So, if they do arrive at the true measure of the cost of living, what does that really mean? What does that really mean? I mean, so what is that going to do? So they find it out, and then we find it out. So I found out I'm poor and I'm making no money. What are we going to do about it once we get the answer?
I saw that Yana Woodhouse.
Hi, Jana.
That is creating positions to fill some pockets to sit and talk and nothing get done. That's
not so unpopular when it comes to some of these government programs.
But
I didn't put it quite like that, but thank you.
Well,
that's why when I read these proposals, some of them scare me to death, because I'm not quite so sure when the money could be used
for things that we can see and feel.
Exactly.
And do.
Exactly.
But I think that the first one is extremely important, no matter who you are, because we obviously need to have clean air and clean drinking water. And even the second one, as it relates to being able to create ways to keep the flooding from.
Yes, I go along with that.
So whoever you are, that Mother Nature is not political. Mother Nature is not a Democrat or a Republican or whatever. When Mother Nature hits, it don't make any difference who you are. You're gonna get hit.
Yep, that's true.
I just want the listeners to also know that it's not because I've known the Assemblywoman for more years that we both want to talk about.
Oh yeah, let's not talk about that.
she's a person that when we talk about what's happening in Harlem, we talk about what's happening on 125th Street, whether it's the Schaumburg or whether it's all of the new development that's going on. There has been a clear record of the involvement, not only through you, but it's a family thing. Even your dad was an advocate, and even before that, as you know, that to the commitment to the development of this community. So I have to say,
Tony, it's ballot number 1 that is about the environment, the clean water, clean air, and about the changing of the infrastructure to help mitigate flood damage. That's right. All in proposal number 1. That's all.
But I just want to make sure that the listeners know
about
all of those things again. But when you flip over, remember Assemblywoman Inez Dickens. That you can't say that, and I can, and it has nothing to do with politics. It just has to do with looking at the facts and looking at the numbers. And as you know, I always believe, I had a good friend, Joe Roberts, who was a Republican. He says, Tony, no matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you vote for the person who best represents you. no matter who they may be, if they're talking the same language or if they can help you, that's who you vote for. Because at one time, the Lincoln Party, the Republican was on top, and the Democrats was the bad guys. And now it's different. The Democrats supposedly on top and the Republicans. But the bottom line is that the person who speaks for you is the person that you want to vote for. And this woman has dedicated her life speaking for not only the Harlem, but as you mentioned, the Harlems of the world. Because what happens here happens all over. And many of the things that Inez has done for Harlem has created a whole wave. It's like a stone in the puddle throughout the country. And I have to salute you. I always, whenever I have an opportunity to tell people about what you do, I try to do that because I know for a fact where you're coming from. And some people may not. Some people are new. Some people hear a lot of things. There are new people who come up and they say all of these things. But, you know, it's the facts, nothing but the truth. You know how they say?
Tony, you don't do it alone. You can only do it with your community standing with you, directing you, helping you, pushing for you. You don't do anything by yourself in a vacuum. You just don't. And I don't take credit all on my own and say, oh, I did. It's a we did. You don't do it by yourself, and you just don't. And I guess, you know, I was born and raised in Harlem. I don't know any other, I've never lived anyplace else. I don't know. I can't say I lived in Chicago or LA or Birmingham, Alabama. I've just never lived anyplace else but Harlem. My family came here to go back to Africa with Marcus Garvey. And know what was done to him, and therefore we wound up as was said, that cast your buckets down where you are. And well, so that's what
speaking about Africa,
what my grandfather did with his sons. Was said, all right, we're going to cast our buckets down wherever we are, and we're going to invest in our community, the Black community. Since they didn't let us go back to Africa, let us build an African American strong, economically strong, politically strong, socially strong community here in Harlem. And that's what he did. That's what he taught his sons and one daughter to do. And that's what they did with their children, was to teach that same ethics, strong support, belief, and love. I love Harlem so much. Sometimes it just hurts. I just feel so good about this community. You know, with all the things that happen, whether we're talking about all the crime, whether we're talking about the unemployment, whether we're talking about the garbage and the rat situation, I still love, and I don't want to live any place else but here in Harlem. But I can't live here by myself either. I got to keep all my family. When I say my family, I'm not talking about just family by blood. I'm talking about all of us got to continue to live here so that we can all stay here connected and stay strong. So, you know, I thank you for acknowledging me, but please, it's about all of us. We all did it together without getting direction from the community. And sometimes you, as a leader, when you put yourself out to ask people to elect you, you put yourself out as a leader. And that means sometimes you have to stand on something that is not popular at the time until people see it. Like 125th Street, initially, people were very resistant to change because they didn't understand it. They didn't realize that I was negotiating with the city administration not to accept what they were offering, but to get as much as I could for the community. And subsequently, I wrote a program out of that the other council members asked me to make citywide, and that was for affordable home ownership. Now, of course, the economy dumped, and so nothing was utilized at that time, but that's still on the books. And so, you know, that's something that can be utilized because that was very important and significant. And it took a while, but finally people understood that I prevented that the existing zoning said you can build anything at any height, anything you want in Harlem. But I prevented that from occurring on 126th, 125th, and 124th Street. Or not from river to river, even though they called it river to river. It wasn't river to river, but it did, in fact, protect the community from severe heights. So it took a minute for people to understand. But once they did begin to understand and saw that it really was enhancement, people began to ask me, why didn't you rezone all of Harlem at the same time? And I said, God, y'all tarred and feathered me for them 3 blocks. But I mean, I mean, it was impossible. You can't rezone, an entire village at the same time. But I at least was able to do that and make that part of my legacy. And the fact that I was able to provide affordable housing with the National Urban League. I thank Mark Marial for agreeing to this, but there in another year or two, there will be cutting the ribbon on opening the doors on 177 units of affordable housing, meaning between 40% and 80% AMI, which is based upon the area, not the area median income as dictated by HUD, which includes New Jersey, but the actual area median income. And that will allow youth who have gone to college and want to come back and live in the community because they want to be near their parents. Their parents are aging and they want to come back home. This will allow them a place to live that they can afford. They maybe can't qualify for the very low income programs because they make a better salary, but they might be able to qualify for the 80%. They may not qualify for the 40%, but I made sure that was done on 125th Street. And so I'm grateful that I was able to do something like that.
Well, Assemblywoman, we
more affordable housing during my tenure than any other council member during my time.
And obviously we can go on when we start talking about all of the things you've done. That would be a whole nother 2 shows. We would probably have
but I don't do it alone though. Not alone.
but
I've been blessed to have the village.
There always has to be some type of leadership. And the leadership that has always worked the best is the leadership that speaks the words that you are speaking, that you cannot do it by yourself and it's not just about you. At that, I have to end our interview. Thank you so much. I know this is a very busy time for you. And I know that there are a lot of things that are happening. As you know, we're going to do the Harlem Mile and all of that for Percy Sutton and some of the people that have been on the shoulders that we all stand on. But I am proud to stand on your shoulders, sister. You are the epitome of what the political structure of Harlem should be, and your record shows it. And thank you so much for being a guest with our show.
Tony, thank you so much. And thank you, Urbanology and Soul City Network, for allowing me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts, my vision, and to talk about the importance of voting, registering.
And please come out to vote. Please come out to vote.
November the 8th.
Or before that, early voting.
Early voting, but if you haven't sent for it, go to the polls.
That's true.
And if you have and you're nervous based upon that court case, then do the affidavit ballot, not the absentee ballot, the affidavit ballot.
Affidavit ballot. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Appreciate
Tony,
your time.
And be safe and stay blessed, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would like to also, as always, thank Matt McCoy and the team from Soul City for providing the platform in order to allow for people not only in Harlem, but throughout the country and now internationally. We're doing a lot of things, as you know, in different countries, Senegal, Ghana, and pretty soon Nigeria, to create the awakening of the sleeping giant concept. And I also want to remind everyone, please be safe. If you are have people running in the marathon, the Harlem Mile from 138th Street and Fifth Avenue to 110th Street and Fifth Avenue, the main stage being on 121st Street in Montmartre Park. Wes, please come out on the 6th and take advantage of that. There are a lot of things that are coming up. We just celebrated the first annual Harlem Champagne, the Global Champagne Week last week, thanks to Richard Cox. And Matt and Jasmine were there. And we're going to Senegal, the drop dead time. I don't know why that term is used, but the last time for people who are interested in Senegal will be this Thursday. We have to secure the flights for our December 8th to December the 15th. However, we are starting to probably by next week work on our May Senegal Jazz Festival trip. So see you next week. Thank you all. And don't forget to go out and vote. Take care. Bye.
This is Kia Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.